This is an interview with Marva Burns for the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute's Oral History Project. I'm Dr. Horace Huntley. We're presently at the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute. Today is July 30th, 1997. Ms. Burns, I want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule and come and sit and talk with me today about Birmingham, about the movement, and really just about Birmingham and life, how it was growing up in Birmingham. Just like to ask you, first of all, about some background. Your mother and father, were they from Birmingham originally?
Yes, Dr. Both of them were Birmingham natives. The Woodlawn community, that's where I grew up, and they were in that area.
Yes. How many brothers and sisters did you have?
I have one brother, Rufus Jr., Rufus Harris Jr.
Was he older or younger than you?
18 months younger than me.
Oh, okay. So you were the big sister.
That's right. That's
Yes.
right.
What about your mother and father's education? They received high school education?
My mother attended H. Parker High School. She went through high school with a diploma. My father, I believe, completed the 11th grade at Parker.
And what kind of work did they do?
My mother was a housewife, and my father opened a cleaner's area, cleaners in Woodlawn. She worked along with him until her later years. My father had worked previously at a Extracurricular art shop and also the Southern Railroad. He went in business at an early age, and he maintained a partnership with Harris Cleaners for almost 45 years.
Did you ever work in the cleaners?
Off and on. Off and on, I learned the business, and I helped along during summers when I was in school.
Did you ever have the desire to carry on that business?
Not at all. Not at all. My brother's doing that now since he retired from teaching.
I see. And you grew up in Woodlawn. What elementary school did you? Do you remember your first grade
I remember
class?
my first grade teacher, Mr. Wyndham, Deputy Wyndham from Fairfield, was the principal at Patterson School. It's a very good elementary school, and Mr. Wyndham was in control throughout.
What do you mean, was in control?
Nobody bothered the Deputy Wyndham. They called him Limp. And he was a very excellent principal who was concerned about students. He told my mother he didn't have any children of his own, and he didn't want any. But he was going to make sure that those children in Patterson behaved themselves. And he was an excellent principal, very academic minded.
When you were at Patterson, were there other teachers that you remember that could possibly have had an impact upon you as a young person at that time?
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Mrs. Catherine Mason was a librarian at Patterson. I worked with her maybe 2 or 3 years in setting up the first library they had there. And when I got to Holman High School, she had already told the librarian at Holman about me. So I was recruited to work in the library at Holman. I thought early on that I wanted to be a librarian, but I changed my mind. This is Friday Seal 5. This is Helen A. Norman, James Beavers, Lennon Briggs. We had very good teachers.
So after Patterson, did you then go to Ulm, or was there a school between Patterson and Ulm?
I went from Patterson Elementary to Ulm High School, but I wasn't zoned to Ulm, and I was zoned to Parker High School. All of my friends went to Parker.
Why did you go to Ulm?
Well, my mother. For some reason, my mother decided that she wanted me to go to Ulm High School. The reason was she had heard that Ulm was a better school. I'm not sure, but after going there, I concluded I thought Ulm was far above Parker High School. Because of the principal, Dr. George Sudell.
Heard a lot about
That's my opinion.
Sudell.
Yes, and they were very fine principal.
When you initially went to Ulm, was that a decision that you agreed with?
I had to
you were very
agree.
skeptical.
I wasn't skeptical. I didn't want to leave my friends because everybody in the community was going on in high school. But she said, I want you to go over. She went to the board, was able to get a transfer for me to Oman High School. And of course, my brother followed me. He had no choice. I was at home, and he came. I got started there.
Were you involved in any extracurricular activities in high school?
I was simply just a student. Very much into my books. I thought about the band, but I never joined the band. And I was just a student. And I received the Oman Award upon graduation from the Senate Oman County.
Oh, yeah.
It was a small scholarship of about $200, a lot at that time.
Sure.
And I took that to Talladega College.
Did you say that you worked in the library?
I worked in the library,
What did you do in the library?
everything, because I'd already had experience from Patterson Elementary School. I knew what to do, so the librarian, Mrs. Marion Russell, just recruited me without my agreeing to it, because Mrs. Mason had told her Marva knows library work. And I did that for 7 years.
And from Oman, you went off to Talladega College.
That's right.
What was the transition like from high school to college?
It was quite a change for me, because I did not want to leave home to go to college. I wanted to go to 10 Miles College. I thought I'd never been away from home. And my mother decided, I want you to go to Talladega. Mr. Bell said, my dear, I wanted to go to Knoxville College, because he was sending everybody who had lessons to Knoxville College. But my mother had decided she had not gone to college. She had heard of Talladega College, and that's where I went. When I got there, I was only 16. Didn't know anybody on the campus.
No one else
Nobody. I was the only person there in the freshman class not from Birmingham, but the only person that I didn't know anybody. Right. So for about 2 weeks, I cried. Called home on the phone, and my father said, well, I'll just come get you. And I decided I'm going to come out of Talladega in 4 years. And I did that. And I loved Talladega.
What was the experience like after you got used to Talladega?
Very close-knit college. Everybody knew everybody. I made friends during the sorority. I mean, I kept an sorority, and I made lifelong friends. We still travel together.
Were you there with Lydia?
Lydia was a sophomore. She made it into the sorority. Attorney Mason Davis was senior the year, I think, my freshman year. His wife is a friend of mine. And there are many people in Birmingham now who were in school with me at Talladega.
Well, Talladega then played a very prominent role in what you would eventually turn out to do.
They did, because I worked with the Talladega Alumni Club in Birmingham since 1959. And we have been like a family. And I have friends I still keep in touch with throughout the country. Alumni conventions, we call them grand reunions every 3 years. And class reunions. I even travel with my Talladega friends. I traveled to Europe last year with the trip in Talladega.
Have you read the book that Lydia and
Blue and Purple? One of the authors is a very dear friend of mine, Untitled Chapter. Lydia's also a friend. You must say that.
Let's see, Lydia finished Talladega, she came to Winona to teach. And I was senior, I guess. And so, at 18, we were very grown, so she was maybe 21.
Very good. Did she teach you?
No, I never had any classes with her, but she was very impressive.
Very good.
I always tease her about that.
Lydia and I go back a long way. She's a good friend of mine.
Yeah.
Milton Hurst was also there.
Very well. Yeah, so there are quite a few Talladegas that I've met since I've been back here. Well, so Talladega then sort of sets the tone. And after you did Talladega, then you come back to Birmingham. Is that right?
I came back to Birmingham. May 1959 was my graduation. Dr. Marva Burns was my commencement speaker. Talladega. He had just let me become the fourth time.
Right.
He was a commencement speaker. I returned to Birmingham to teach at Alman High School, September 1959. Back to Alman.
Back to Alman.
It's like that.
Yes. Now, why did you decide to go back to Alman?
Mr. George Bell wanted me to teach there and told my mother I want Marva over here because I like young teachers. And if anybody gets a job, Marva will have one. Tell her to apply and sit and over else. So I was happy to go back. It was very difficult to get a job in that time.
Right.
Very difficult.
1959, 1960. 60 is the year that students started to get involved in the movement. 1960 is the year that the sit-in movement started around the South. 61 would be the year that the Freedom Riders came through Birmingham. As a new teacher on the faculty, were there any discussions of these events that were taking place in your school or even in the city at that time? Were you in any way cognizant of what was going on around you at that time?
We were aware, but that was before Dr. King came to Birmingham, right?
Yes, it was.
We were aware.
This is 2-3 years prior to its coming. But the Alabama Christian movement, of course, was in full force. And they were meeting. They would meet every Monday night.
Right.
And of course, in 1962, the Miles College students, along with the Alabama Christian movement, would organize a selective buying campaign downtown and boycotting stores downtown, in effect. And then in 63, of course, is the year that Martin Luther King would come to town.
Right.
Now, I know that you had some involvement. How did you initially get involved in the movement?
I became involved in the movement because of my mother. She's ill now, but she was very active in the Alabama Christian movement for human rights. The meetings were on Monday nights. She was working in the clinics during the day. And on Monday night, she had to be at the movement meeting, along with several other persons from the Woodlawn community. But I became involved because as the situation picked up, it was dangerous for her to go out driving herself to the meeting, so I volunteered to go along with her. Because I was interested. I'd hear her talk about what was going on, and when you hear, you want to go and hear for yourself and see what's going on.
Was your father involved at all?
He was not involved. He wanted to know everything that happened. He provided a car for her to go, gave her contributions. He did not attend at all.
Why did he not attend? Do you have any idea?
There wasn't lack of interest. Sometimes he was tired, but I think it was because he was just going to sit and listen to find out what happened from her.
And you attended the mass meetings. How would you describe a typical mass meeting?
Spirit-filled, highly energized, informative, and just a place to be.
Now, Dr. King has served as your commencement speaker at Talladega in 59.
Mm-hmm.
When he came to Birmingham, did you have the opportunity to hear him speak here?
Time and time again. I attended those meetings at night. Sometimes he sat until 11:30. The way they were set up, you had to sit all night almost, maybe until 9:30 or 10 until Dr. King came on. Because they had all of the business and the collections and the communication as to what was going on in the Birmingham area. Dr. Y. Walker and all of the other leaders came on ahead. Even Reverend Ralph Abernathy set the tone for Dr. King. So if you wanted to hear Dr. King, you had to sit and sit and sit. And finally he would come on and everybody was still there, nobody left. And even the music was just something that lifted the spirits and the hopes of all the blacks who were attending.
Birmingham being one of the largest cities in South Carolina and having this image of segregation, apartheid.
Mm-hmm.
Were there any instances where you actually experienced racial animosity in your years of growing up here in Birmingham, personally?
Personally, I never experienced any racial animosity as such, but when I started to work at Allman, I had to ride a bus because I didn't have a car. I couldn't afford a car. I had to save a couple years to get a car. And I had to sit behind the board, move the board, stand.
You did move the board?
From time to time, they let us move the board because I was going to Woodland. And sometimes we had more seats in the back and more spaces.
Yeah.
I experienced all of that. I would have worked at the Porter Clothing Company on 30th Avenue North during college. A couple of summers I worked there, stock person. And there were certain things that you just knew because you were black. And you
Like what, for instance?
The lady who was in charge of the floor, the buyer, would open a Coke and she would drink from it. And she said, Marva, you can have the rest of this Coke. You know?
Oh.
There was never any racial, but it was just, why drink from a Coke that this lady had already opened and she would drink from it?
Oh. So there are always little incidences such as that that reminded you of
Right.
quote, your place.
That's right.
Now, as a young teacher at Allman High School, I know that students were recruited from the various schools.
Right.
As a young teacher, what was your reaction to the students who made the decision to leave school or not attend your class and get involved in the movement?
I was very proud. There weren't many teachers attending the movement meetings. I didn't know of any teachers from other schools. There were two other teachers from Allman High School. Mrs. Patrick Goldie was attending, Mrs. Darcy Evans, and I. And Mr. Bell said in the faculty meeting, I have teachers teaching all day and meeting all night. He was aware that we were attending the meetings and so were the students.
Did he discourage it?
No, he never said anything. He never discouraged it. He just threw that out to us. And even the students would come up to talk about it, not talk about it with us. I wasn't afraid of my job. The council at the time came to me and said, you're going to lose your job. These students know that you're going to the meetings and that they're leaving school because you're talking with him. You got to be careful. That didn't mean anything to me because I wasn't afraid to lose my job. Yet I did not march, but I was very supportive of it. They knew that.
So the students, well, did you talk about it in your, what did you teach?
English.
English, okay. Did you talk about it in your class?
I didn't talk about it in class as a subject.
Right.
No. We talked about that after class, on the grounds, lunch, wherever.
Right.
They just come up and ask questions.
What, did you talk with other teachers about it?
I did. I collected money from them.
Mm-hmm.
Even I called Ms. Wolf gave a contribution, I think $25 once. She wasn't attending the meeting, but I had other friends who were teachers, would not attend the meeting. They wanted to know what was going on. And they would make contributions, but there was no list made of contributors. We didn't need that, but they were supported on a financial basis.
So they were hesitant, of course, to get involved.
I think so.
But would you then suggest that although they were not willing to personally be involved, they were in fact in favor of what was going on?
They were in favor. But they really didn't know. They didn't know what they were missing because they should have been there also.
Did you ever participate in any of the marches or the demonstrations?
I did not march, nor did I demonstrate. It was on a supportive basis, attendance, finance, and other means.
You know, normally when we talk about civil rights movement, men normally come to mind. What would you say would have been the most important role that the women would play in the movement at that time?
I think the women were the backbone of the movement, as in our churches. That there were many men there. They sang in the choir, but you didn't have as many men as women. They were ushers, you had more women. They did whatever, but there were more women taking part. And they came along and held it up, but the women were most outstanding in their support.
Did your brother participate?
No, my brother did not participate. I never knew why.
Did he go to Talladega?
No, my brother attended Grambling. He was a graduate of Grambling.
So he then would not have been here during the time of the demonstrations, would he?
No, he wasn't. He went to Grambling on a football scholarship.
So
And he was there by right. He was right.
Mm-hmm.
He was just behind me in school when he was away most of the time.
Right. What about other friends that were not teachers there involved? Did you have friends and neighbors who were actively involved other than your mother and her friends? Were there folk that were your age that were doing the same?
There were some from other communities, but very few from my community. That's right. Very few from my community. Woodlawn. I suppose you had more from the maybe Tittesville community, some Smithfield, but not many from the Woodlawn community.
How long did you teach on?
9 years.
So the year you started in 59. So where did you go after you left Oakland?
After High School, I was out a year. I have a son. I was out a year on maternity leave. I was asked to work at Hayes High School by Mr. John Norman. I think Oakland was about to close at the time. Mr. Sheila was principal there. Mr. Norman had already asked me prior to that to come to Hayes High School. So I was selected to go there, sent there by the board.
Now Hayes was a relatively new school, maybe less than 10 years.
Less than 10 years. I went to Oakland in 1959 and Hayes opened when I was in my early years of teaching. And Mr. Bell said, "Marva, they have a little school down at down in Woodland Capital. Don't you want to go down there?" He knew he didn't want me to go, and I wasn't going. But he just threw that out. Then later, after Mr. Bell passed, Mr. Norman called and told me he had an opening at Hayes High School. But I chose not to go. And when he took my name from the pool, I had no choice. So I stopped at the meeting the first day. He said, "Stand up, Marva." She didn't want to come, but I have her down here now. So that's how I got there, just that 1 year.
You were there 1 year at Hayes.
1 year. I left on court order at the end of May 1970. We were sent by court order throughout Birmingham, and I was sent to Huffman High School, in Huffman Community.
There's been a criticism of the way that teachers were removed from forming all black schools and placed in all white schools. Some have suggested that the way that integration, so to speak, happens, that the best black teachers out of black schools were transferred to white schools, and young, inexperienced white teachers were placed in black schools. What would you say to a person like that?
I believe some of that is true. I really do, because I saw a large turnover of teachers in Huffman High School. I was there 22 years, and it was very difficult those early years. And you really had to be on top of your subject. And even at that, you were monitored by the program specialist. In fact, the program specialist in English told us, black teachers, just go ahead and give them a C. Don't bring problems on yourselves, because if you do, you're going to create problems that you don't know. But even at that, you had to really do your work, know your job, and stand behind what you do.
What was the reception by the faculty, which was predominantly white?
We were there. They were not very friendly. There was the head of the math history department who never spoke. And I sat in front of her over at the doctor's office one afternoon for about 3 hours, and she looked at me and I looked at her. But we, as is the case, we stuck together.
How many black teachers were?
Maybe 25, 30.
That many?
That many.
So you had somewhat of a support network then. It's not like being there alone.
Now, before we went there in 1970, I believe there were only 3 black teachers in Huffman. The principal was, I guess I called him a racist man, because anything you said, he followed it up very closely. I told a student once, this girl was very difficult, and I told her she had a mental block. So she told her mother, her parents, and he came to me to question me about what was her mental block. And I answered, she has a problem with me. He was hostile in a sense, in a very subtle way. But after he retired from Huffman, he came back to visit on occasion, and he was an altogether different person. I could hardly believe this was the same person. And during my tenure at Huffman, I had more than 7 principals. They didn't stay very long because the community demanded, more or less, that they do what they wanted them to do.
Huffman, 1970s. What was the reception of your students?
They were very, very difficult to handle. And that's because as black teachers, we were given basic classes. Basic, not regular, basic classes. And the composition of my classes was something like maybe 25 boys, white boys, 3 girls, maybe 1 black student. Basic. And they were very difficult to handle, very difficult. So you had all day I was put in a room. There weren't any windows in that room down on the lower level. It did something to my eyesight, and I felt closed in. The noise, trying to carry on the class. In fact, it was very difficult. Until, 6 or 7 years, I had only 2 or 3 black students all day.
Did you ever contemplate quitting?
I never contemplated quitting because there was really nowhere to go. I had friends here, faculty members that I really liked. So we got together and talked about it and went on to our classes and made the best of it.
So you were at Huffman for how long?
22 years.
22 years.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Quite a
I saw a
career.
change. I saw a change in the school, yeah.
How has the school system changed since you started teaching at Oldham, and during the time, from the time that you started at Oldham until you retired? How would you evaluate the system?
Dr. Huntley said it has gone downhill. As a young teacher, age 20 at Alden High School, I enjoyed working. Some of the students, many of them were eager to learn. They were not very difficult to discipline. And I had a rapport with them. And with the passing of time, and in my latter years at Upland High School, I saw Black students lose interest. Some of them felt that because they were at Upland High School and in classes with white students, they had it made. Just because they were in class with them. You couldn't tell them anything, other than maybe taking them outside the class in the hall, speaking privately with them. But many of them were not really eager to learn. And they were difficult to discipline.
The Black students.
Black students. They had discontinued the magnet schools. The Upland was a magnet school at one time. And I taught students, Black students who came from all over Birmingham. All of Birmingham. Some of them were excellent students, eager to learn, easy to discipline, but then they cut out the magnet school program. And you had some who were being drawn from a certain area, and they were just out of control. They're still out of control, I think.
So you then look at the experience there at Huffman as being rather typical on education within the Birmingham school system.
I do. I think it has gone to that now. It's the same as it is everywhere else. The faculty has made another turnover. I believe about 90% of the student body is Black. That's what I've been told.
Yeah, that's what
Most of the Black teachers have found somewhere to go in the county schools. Those who did not retire, they've left Huffman. The community is becoming Black, surrounding the schools. And everybody that I see tells me it's a bad situation.
We've covered a lot of territory. Is there any other thing that you would like to leave with us today in relationship to your development here in Birmingham, race relations, on education, or whatever?
I like to say that I'm proud to be a native of Birmingham, Alabama. I feel that I've lived during the best years of Birmingham. I saw a change, a transition. It's not what it should be, but it's not what it was. And I think there is a future for Birmingham, but I think that we as a group of people, not only Blacks but also whites, need to refocus because it can be better. Blacks have not done what they should have done. I think Dr. King really led the way. And we have fallen back. Integration did not accomplish its purpose. And I think that in order to go forward, we need to reassess where we're going, what we need to do, and move forward. And I think Birmingham is a good place to live. I've been many places, and there's no place like home.
Thank you, Ms. Burns. You've been quite helpful.
Thank you for having me.